pleasure to welcome you all to today's event. My name is Dan Correa. I know many of you, but not all. I'm CEO of the Federation of American Scientists, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to this event on behalf of the Alliance for Learning Innovation. We are a coalition, I think as most know, of nonprofits, philanthropic leaders, educators, researchers, and private sector leaders who believe that breakthrough education research holds the answer to many of our education system's most persistent challenges and its source of unimaginable possibilities for its future. We're thrilled to bring together this conversation and this group to discuss the ongoing need for federal investment in a stronger, modernized, and more inclusive education R&D ecosystem. We're also here to celebrate a milestone. This coalition officially launched just about a year ago, and it launched with a laser focus on a challenge that we collectively face as a society. Federal investment in education research is distressingly low. And there are lots of ways to look at this. If you look at, for example, the Department of Education's budget allocated to R&D, it's lower than agencies such as the Department of Agriculture as a percentage of overall budget, and it's far lower than agencies that we typically think of as the research agencies. To boot, if you assess across the economy, investment in education research or workforce research, all skills, it's been declining over the last 20 years in real dollars. It's not keeping up with inflation. We view this as a crisis, and we believe that a different future is possible. More and better investment into understanding what works, for whom, and in what context in education. One focused on developing new tools and practices within education that have the potential to deliver dramatic advances in student outcomes. And so today I want to congratulate you on Ally's official one-year anniversary and congratulate those out there that are doing so much of the work that we collectively celebrate. You have had an outsized impact on federal policy. You helped to create a more connected R&D community that speaks with a common voice and with shared urgency. Just for example, Ally serves as the go-to experts for policymakers on education R&D topics and the implementation of evidence-based approaches in classrooms and school systems. Ally members have provided testimony in the House Appropriations Subcommittee for Education and the Senate Health Committee. We've collaborated with Congressional and agency staff to shape policy proposals like the NEED Act and help to strengthen existing federal programs such as ESRA and the statewide longitudinal data systems. And the coalition's advised Congressional staff on the early successes of IES's new ARPA-like moonshot program, NCAID, which we hope will inform the direction of future federal ed R&D funding. Additionally, Ally has encouraged new working relationships between key federal agencies, such as NSF, IES, OSTP, and DoD, some of which we will hear from today. So that's a lot of work, and that's pretty expansive, and it's laying the groundwork for something very exciting. And in short, what we're here to celebrate is that what started as a really powerful insight and idea and an urgent moment has become a movement. And the numbers bear this out. Over the last year, the Ally Coalition has grown to over 50 and active and participating member boards, representing a vibrant community dedicated to catalyzing educational innovation. So why does all this matter? Because despite these achievements, there's still very much a long road ahead. In fact, the need for new solutions and innovation in the K-12 system in particular is more urgent than ever. The fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic continues to impact our students and schools. Student performance data from the most recent nation's report card shows national math and reading scores at historic lows, and our schools are experiencing new problems like record highs in chronic absenteeism. Now, you all know all about that, but what we're here to talk about is the way in which education R&D can play a critical role both in understanding these issues and developing innovative solutions. So in terms of an education R&D agenda, I want to challenge this group to think about three main buckets. So one, I believe we need more federal resources dedicated to understanding what works in education. We know that strong investment in ed R&D not only informs solutions, but also drives innovation and allows us to explore new frontiers, advancements in AI and tech through the lens of evidence and student outcomes. So that's one. Two, we need ambitious, goal-oriented investments to develop solutions to stubborn challenges that are affecting student outcomes. Most student writing shouldn't go unreviewed. What would change that dynamic? And then finally, we need to ensure that all of this actually makes it into the classroom. This includes communicating bright spots and elevating state and local leaders like Maryland's own Dr. Carrie Wright, who you will hear from today. And finally, when we think about that agenda, I want to contextualize this a little bit. This is obviously a moment when many of us are preoccupied with November's elections. And I just think it's really worth underscoring that just how bipartisan this agenda is and can be. The successes I've mentioned have drawn on broad bipartisan support, and the agenda I've just described is one I truly believe we can all rally around. So we can't wait to dig into what's ahead for this movement with you and our esteemed panelists today. I want to extend a special thank you to our panelists joining us today, as well as our federal colleagues and partners. Unfortunately, Representative Bonamici had a last-minute conflict and wasn't able to join us today, but I know she's particularly excited about this movement. Want to thank her for her ongoing support of Ally and education R&D, and I also want to thank Senator Murray's office for helping us get this organized and making this entire event happen. I also want to offer a special acknowledgement to Dr. Mark Schneider, who's joining us today, right here in the front, for his leadership over the past 6 years at the helm of the Institution of Education Sciences. So much of what I've just described, Mark has been a centerpiece of that movement, and I think speaks to the bipartisan potential of so much of this work. So now let me turn it over to Sarah Shapiro, who leads Ally, to speak more about what the Ally Coalition has accomplished in the past and our vision for the future. Please join me in welcoming Sarah.
Thanks so much, Dan, for that overview of Ally's work over the past year. I'm incredibly appreciative of Dan's continued support of Ally and the important role the Federation of American Scientists has played in launching and incubating this amazing coalition. And thank you to all of the coalition members who are here today and all of the prospective coalition members who we're going to recruit today. But I want to start at the beginning because we're talking about ed R&D and we're making assumptions that you understand what that is. What is education research and development that we call ed R&D? At its core, as Dan said, it's an attempt to answer three core questions. What works in education? For whom does it work? And under which conditions? It means developing new education tools and practices that have the potential to deliver dramatic advances in student outcomes. And I think on some level we all intuitively get that, right? We've all gone through school. There are many parents, aunts, uncles, godparents, and others who are taking care of and care about children who are going through school. And we know instinctively that what works to teach an 8th grader in Houston who is behind grade level in reading isn't necessarily the same as what it takes to teach a 1st grader in rural New Mexico how to read. Or that what worked for us when we were in high school might not work for kids entering high school today. It would be unfair to students, their parents, their communities, and our nation if we do not ensure that the curriculum and instructional practices we put in front of them are proven to work and are evidence-based. But without a robust ed R&D system, we simply can't know what works for whom and under which conditions. States, districts, and schools are left without a firm understanding of what the research says actually works, and they have to rely on anecdotal evidence to help guide their investments in student learning. We know that without a robust education R&D ecosystem, our students won't be prepared for an increasingly sophisticated job market. And if kids aren't prepared for jobs of the future, our nation's competitiveness will be at risk. We also know that students will learn unevenly without investment into understanding what works for kids with different needs. I think about my own kid, Joshua, some of you know him, who had significant speech delays. We were able to get him evaluated and seen by the appropriate specialists, but we know how hard that is in many parts of the country where there are not many speech pathologists available. And we know that nearly 3.4 million children require speech and language services and are at risk of falling behind because of this shortage. Luckily, the National Science Foundation, NSF, and the Institute of Education Sciences, IES, are partnering on breakthrough education R&D through the AI Institute for Exceptional Education, which is focused on closing this speech pathology services gap through the research, development, and use of advanced AI technologies. This is just one example of a concrete issue that EdR&D is being deployed against to make sure that all students have the opportunity to learn. So that's why we're here today, and why Ally exists, to advocate for the increased support of the research and development of evidence-based innovations in education through federal advocacy, field building, policy research, and importantly, storytelling. I don't think we've done a good enough job of telling this story, right? All of us here in the room care about this. We showed up at 9 a.m. to talk about EdR&D, but it's something we need to do a better job of. And I want to echo what Dan said a moment ago. Ally has successfully started a movement. This is a movement. You all are a part of it, and we thank you for that. We are paving the way for R&D that centers students and practitioners, improves talent pathways, and expands the workforce needed in a globally competitive world. In its first year, as Dan said, we've grown to 50 members, and it includes many of the leading voices and thinkers in education. Again, all of you sitting in this room today. We are a vibrant and diverse community that shares a commitment to educational innovation across ideologies. And with Ally helping to make the case for greater investments in federal spending on education R&D, that spending has increased by $1.2 billion over the last 3 years. And for IES this year, we're calling for an investment of $900 million. This is to ensure that the agency has the capacity to expand their investments into what works in education. Because we have to ensure that every dollar invested in a school program yields a measurable and significant return in student learning outcomes. That's where a strong IES comes in. And we also recognize that education R&D happens outside of the Department of Education. That's why we're calling for an investment of $1.95 billion at the STEM Education Directorate at NSF. And in addition to strong investment into federal agencies tasked with EdR&D, we've been a strong advocate for a new type of center at IES. We are calling on Congress to establish a National Center for the Advanced Development in Education, also known as NCAID, at IES. This center would advance high-reward, informed risk education projects through a model similar to the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, or DARPA. This is the group behind Internet and GPS. You've heard of that? The U.S. has invested in this type of research in health, agriculture, energy, almost every other sector of our economy except for education. And education is long overdue for this kind of breakthrough research. I'm grateful to Representatives Bonamici and Fitzpatrick who introduced the new Essential Education Discoveries Act, or the NEED Act, which would create NCAID. I want to also thank Senators Cornyn and Bennett, who will be introducing a Senate companion to the NEED Act shortly. And as Dan said, this is bipartisan. This is a bipartisan movement, which is really remarkable for Washington, D.C. right now. Having a center like NCAID is critical, and I think everyone recognizes that. And we know that AI is rapidly making its way into classrooms. I know I was saying to Joseph earlier that AI should have been in the tagline of this, description of what we're doing today. But and there's a really cool survey that the Walton Family Foundation and the Levy team released yesterday that reported that 49% of teachers say they use chatbots weekly in school. And last year that number was 40%. So this is a quickly changing landscape. I think all of us know that. It's incumbent upon us and it's incumbent upon Congress to invest in an R&D system that researches the best ways to incorporate AI into the classroom, including helping teachers better understand the research we're all doing in this room, right? Helping them understand it and helping them choose the optimal program for each learner. And through a center like NCAID, the federal government can invest in innovative technologies, programs, and solutions to address persistent challenges like the ones Dan mentioned: chronic absenteeism, declining literacy rates, any problem of practice in education Ed R&D can be deployed against it. And once something is proven effective, the federal government can help ensure that these interventions and tools are adopted in classrooms around the country. Ally also helped inform and supports the immediate passage of AREA, the Advancing Research and Education Act, which would reauthorize the Education Sciences Reform Act, or ESRA. So lots of words and acronyms that we've been throwing at you, but this is the bipartisan bill that would increase the quality and inclusiveness of education R&D and evaluation, strengthen state and local education R&D capacity, and ensure that IES is able to make the evidence more actionable for educators and students. We urge the Senate and the House Committee on Education and the Workforce to take it up in the House to pass it. And to better understand the current state of affairs and chart a path forward, Ally, in partnership with our coalition members, Innovate EDU and Ed Council, convened 3 diverse nonpartisan task forces to address critical priorities. The first one, strengthening state and local education R&D infrastructure. The second, making Ed R&D more inclusive. And the third one, expanding the role of historically Black colleges and universities, minority-serving institutions, and tribal colleges and universities in Ed R&D. I want to thank everyone who was involved in those task forces and briefs. They're available around the room, so please take a copy. And we're honored to have some of those task force members speaking later. So as we move on to hear from these incredible speakers, I want to leave you with this. In just 1 year, Ally has made significant strides in advancing and advocating for a stronger Ed R&D ecosystem. By continuing to work together, we can ensure that every student benefits from innovative and effective educational practices. We believe that the future of our education system and our nation's competitiveness depends on all of you and on our collective will to commit to investing in research and development. So with that, I want to welcome our amazing panelists who are sitting right here: Dr. Carrie Wright, Augustus Mays, Dr. Brenda Allen, and Richard Collada on stage to join me to delve into this a little more deeply.